Well, greetings, everybody. Peter Maravellis here, welcoming you to another installment of City Lights Live. Tonight, together with our friends at Grey Wolf Press, we are delighted to bring you Diane Seuss together with Gail Wronski in an evening of poetry reading and conversation. Before we begin, as is customary at the outset of each event, I would like to acknowledge that we are beaming to you from the unceded ancestral homelands of the Ohlone people, aka the San Francisco Bay Area. I would like to take this moment to offer respect to those who have come before us as stewards of the land. Diane Seuss is a Pulitzer Prize-winning writer and author of 5 books of poetry. This includes the book of sonnets titled Frank, winner of the National Book Critics Circle Award and a PEN Prize. Also, the titles Still Life with Two Dead Peacocks and a Girl, Four-Legged Girl, and White Gown Blown Open, winner of the Juniper Prize. She was a 2020 Guggenheim Fellow, and a 2021 she received the John Updike Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. She makes her home in Michigan. Tonight we celebrate the publication of her new collection titled Modern Poetry. It's published by Grey Wolf Press, and it takes the title from the first textbook that Ms. Seuss encountered as a child and the first poetry course she took in college. We experience her making use of the forms and terms of musical and poetic craft, that is to say, the ballad, the fugue, the aria, the refrain, and the coda. She explores the space between romantic and modernist traditions, using her personal formative experiences with poetry as a lens through which to view our moment and ask what poetry can be to us now at this juncture. Joining her tonight in reading and conversation will be Gail Wronski. Gail Wronski is the author of 8 books of poetry, 2 co-authored collections of poetry, and 2 books of translations of the poetry of the Argentinian poet Alicia Partnoy. Her books include The Stranger You Are, featuring artwork by the renowned artist Gronk, and Under the Capsized Boat We Fly. So please join us now in offering a warm welcome to Diane Seuss and Gail Wronski. Welcome to City Lights. Such a great honor to have you both.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's great to see everybody here.
Yeah, so am I going to go first, Di?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll start us off. First, I just want to thank Peter, and thanks to City Lights for, which is one of my favorite bookstores, for hosting this event, and which is a celebration of this amazing book by Diane Seuss, which in my mind is bound for a kind of iconic status like that of Sylvia Plath's Ariel or Galway Kinnell's Book of Nightmares. I really feel very strongly about this book. And so thanks to Grey Wolf Press for publishing it, and thanks to Diane for inviting me to share this event with her. I'm going to start by reading a few short poems from my most recent book, which is The Stranger You Are, published by Tia Chucha Press here in Los Angeles. And this book is a collection of ekphrastic poems that were written to accompany drawings by the artist Gronk, who is an LA-based and really well-known painter, performance artist. He designs opera sets for Peter Sellers, and he's also a dear friend. So let me start. There you have it. You took your daily dive into the lake inside you. When you surfaced, you said, "Nobody knows who the dead are. That's the source of their power over us." "Well, there you have it," I said. "Your eyes are like these stones," you said. "I found them in the caves at Lake Bottom." I dreamed of a garden of beautiful humans. The bodies were red, and vines among them rose greenly. I sat in there for a long time thinking of something I wanted to say to you, something this side of intelligent, something about how we're bodies, and that's that. Wasn't the garden miraculous? It had no fruit in it at all. It had no death at all. Let's see. Only the moon is immortal. And for this one, I think you're going to need to see the picture. It's so great. I'm going to hold up this picture and read the poem. I'm hovering over a flame and my body is made of ice. In this predicament, I realize, one, that I've made this fire so my deep need for marvels could be satiated, and two, God made me ice so that ultimately I will be transformed.
Oh.
That's my fire and ice poem. You're seeing things that aren't there. I only want what's best for you, which is why I've got to say that that giant blue ghost horse you think you're standing under isn't real. It isn't full of ghost Greek soldiers. It won't help you capture the famously beautiful woman. And even as an act of the imagination, it's taking up a lot of room in here. And people are starting to talk. Who's the guy with the giant blue ghost horse that isn't real, they're saying. It's you they're talking about. You projecting your inner life onto the world. You poet. It's you. These things happen, Federico, and this is a poem in which I meet Federico Garcia Lorca. The day I came to the red cave where poems are born, wearing my best black dress, you were inside, and we agreed that although the exquisite glimmer of eternity shines in the depth of all suffering, we were tired of the constant throbbing of police cars. We were tired of the mass-produced melancholy of these days. We agreed that words that had once been torn bleeding from our hearts now seemed void of meaning. May I come in? I asked. Yes, you said. That word, as pure as a bird's song, almost startled us both. And one more from this book. That answers that. You're an elegant hand holding up a bouquet of black flowers. I'm a stick figure of a person with flames on top of my head. I love you because you're flammable. You love me because you haven't read the warning labels. Someday, like all good ideas, will be forgotten. But meanwhile, we live here on a planet called yesterday. It dies every night. Okay, and now I'm going to read 3 shortish poems that are new. And these poems were inspired by William Blake's Proverbs of Hell. So I'm calling them Proverbs. This is Proverbs number 4. Sometimes it gets really late, really early. Time to brush away the noisy flocks of demons that possess you and imagine yourself shining the way an insect shines, brightly, almost phosphorescently in a lamp. Imagine yourself that tiny and beautiful. Imagine singing a wispy song like a mosquito. Imagine that time, which doesn't exist, is God. That love is a place to hide safely for a moment. That thatched cottage by the yellow river. That there's no more stupid shit you have to remember. Days pass, each one turning unreadable pages. Poetry happens when the body speaks out of the thick darkness of its imagery. What we call the past is simply the way things happen to be arranged once. I will always be the one singing the anthem of the infinite in a bargain basement. Proverbs number 6. Don't search for sand through sand. Just don't. Don't try to write a final definitive record of who you've been. It would read like a funeral guest book. And really, are any of us one of those aristocratic writers who will have guest books, who will have funerals? Only the immortals who are immaterial can afford not to care about material things. Gather in your hands the metal debris, the black powder that no broom eliminates, the leaves of grass to which you've given names, the pieces of cloth that listen to you. I never wanted to pass as someone exemplary. Like Fernando Pessoa, I have more than one soul. So do you. One of mine is shaped like an hourglass. I'll leave it behind me when I go, hoping that someone turns it over. And this is my last poem, Proverbs number 12. And this ends with a quote from Wallace Stevens' poem, Anecdote of the Jar. Poetry doesn't die. It will be there in the afterlife, as blatantly plangent, painful, and piercing as any fado that ever emerged from a throat. We need it now, the way a shipwrecked man needs a plank of wood to hold on to, the way seeds need sun. So our brains attach themselves to words, go over and over the same thoughts, plunge into them, drown in them, phrases that lead us along vertiginous paths into deep valleys from which arise dim murmurs of voices that seem to be calling us. Voices that can help us feel in our flesh the wound that makes us human. In other words, poetry, which is a bit like the milkweed pod I pulled open one summer in my hand. Fine white strands of silk with brown seeds attached floated up into still air. When I grabbed them, they clung to my skin, making my hands seem strange to me, almost supernaturally beautiful, and made the wilderness of my childhood rise up around me, no longer wild, but somehow even more free. Thank you for listening.
That was amazing. Absolutely amazing. You know, it's a trip to sit here with decades having passed between the time we met in college when we were stuck as roommates together in a room in an old brick dormitory, and then lived poetry together for a few years. And to hear you after all this time, well, as you said, time doesn't exist. So I'm going to have to kind of pull myself together here and thank City Lights Bookstore and Peter, our host. We found out we share a lot in common with Peter, and especially to Gail, my co-reader and partner in crime and conversation tonight. I'm going to start with the title poem of modern poetry, which I saved for tonight because Gail and I, after meeting, took that course together at age 18 as first year students. And as I said, serendipitous roommates. And when we talked over the weekend to plan this, we both agreed that we didn't understand Wallace Stevens at all during that course. And I probably still don't. Maybe Gail does. So this is called Modern Poetry. It's the title poem. It's the course we took together with Conrad Hilberry, a mentor. And it was also the title of a book my mom brought into our house when she went to college after my dad died, when I was young and my mom was young. And all I remember is this red and white cover and the words modern poetry. Modern poetry. It was what I'd been waiting for my whole life, but I wasn't ready for poetry. I didn't have the tools. Retke, I appreciated the greenhouse poems, and decades later saw his bed, toilet, upright piano in that desolate town where he was raised, not unlike the desolate town where I was raised. No greenhouses in my town, but the green giant factory where mushrooms grew on cow shit. Wallace Stevens. I wrote a paper on loneliness in Jersey City, having no clue what he meant by the deer and the dachshund are one, and got an A anyway by faking it. The professor made us read Sunday Morning, another Stevens poem, which struck me as long. I couldn't focus yet. I was 18. A poem against heaven, he told us. Is there no change of death in paradise? Does ripe fruit never fall? That I could understand, having known some plums, and that icky sweet smell of a dead mouse in the wall. Gerard Manley Hopkins, not modern per se, but my professor said one of the first modernists. So what did modern poetry really mean? Maybe just fucked up, as Hopkins was for sure, and tongue twistery and depressed, Jesuit, maybe bipolar. I stared at his photograph, the long nose and cleft in his chin. Noticed that even in no worse, there is none. He had the wherewithal to put in the accent marks, to school us as to how to hear the thing. And WCW, Williams, my roommate and I called him Billy C. Billy Goat. I knew something of wheelbarrows, old women, and as I said, plums, but the prof showed us how complicated it all really was. The whole no ideas but in things thing, the near rhymes, depends and chickens and red. Again, I was not yet capable of being smart and wondered if I ever would be, though I kept getting A's on the papers, maybe because the professor felt sorry for me, and I'm not just saying that. The final modern poet was Sylvia Plath, a woman, blonde, and I didn't trust blondes, smart, angry, angry at men, I was told, depressed, cheated on, dead. I imagined her being in modern poetry with us, mopping the floor with us, with her developed mind, her ooh and ah sounds, her thesis, The Magic Mirror, on the double in Dostoevsky. I pictured her calling me a charlatan, like Gaylord did in class the week we studied her. He called her a charlatan psychopath and me a charlatan for sticking up for her. I had to go back to the dorm and look up charlatan in the dictionary. A fraud, the dictionary said, a quack, which, yes, I was, though so was Gaylord. Who isn't a quack at 18? I wanted to love Sylvia, but to love her would mean loving someone who would have hated me. It would be a few years after I flunked out of college until I took a class called Women's Literature at the public university down the hill with a teacher named Stephanie, who looked a lot like Françoise Sagan, teenage author of Bonjour Tristesse, but older and with a cap of gray hair. Margaret Atwood, Toni Morrison, Adrienne Rich, Charlotte Perkins Gilman, Plath, Sexton, Lord, Kate Chopin, Alice Walker, Juna Barnes. I was beginning to understand, but barely, to ask a pertinent question now and then, like where the hell was Langston Hughes in modern poetry, Dickinson in 19th century American lit? If Hopkins was a modernist, how about Dickinson with her weird rhymes and what Galway Canal called her inner speech-like sliding syncopated rhythm, a counterpoint to her iambic lines, a horse straining at the bit in the direction of free verse. A woman who drove a motorcycle to women's literature, wore a fringed black leather jacket, and worked at the Kalamazoo airport in the booth where people pay for parking, was shot and killed there by her ex-boyfriend. From then on, the class became something else. Stephanie had us over to her house, a damp place in the woods. She roasted a goat and served it to us, shredded on blue plates. The books had become more and less important. We spoke of them huddled on the floor by the fire. I remember most of all the bushel baskets of apples and grapes for winemaking, drawing fruit flies. I'm not complaining. It was all more than I deserved. The goat, the greenhouse, the liberated blonde badass on her motorcycle, Sula surfacing Sunday morning, ripe plums, my education. Since that's a longer poem, I'm going to read one other a bit longer poem and then close with a shorty, and then Gail and I will talk. This is called Another Ballad. And when I mentioned winning the tug of war at the bicentennial celebration in my hometown, that was actually Gail and me. It's another ballad. So there's poems in this collection that are sort of shaped like ballads. You're not old, I say to the old dog. You're handsome and you will never die. He growls at me to establish his waning dominance. You are the king, I say, a ruthless king. Why do I speak to the dog, you ask? Why do I write of the dog? Because long ago I took myself out of the running for human company, like my mother before me, who never again wore a dress or skirt after my father escaped this mortal coil. Never another dress or skirt, like my mother before me. I took myself out of the running, no longer dressing to seduce via my own brand of seduction. I was never seductive in the traditional sense, but in the untraditional sense, I knew how to wield seduction. It had its day, let me say. Let me say I wielded it effectively enough to draw in a baseball player, a football player, 20 years my junior, a used car salesman, a pimp, a smelly old boss, a cardiologist, and an old minister who broke into my house under the guise of needing a cup of cool water, all to tell me what I do to men. You know, he said, what you do to men. You know what you do to men. It worked until it didn't. It worked when I was, for a time, the princess of a hive of pansexual filmmakers. I hate her, a woman director said when I appeared on screen. I hate her, but she didn't hate me. My blue cotton pants bought on the street in Afghanistan had done their trick. My pants bought from a man without arms or legs who rolled over the streets on a skateboard. Indigo pants with a drawstring. They did their work for a hot minute. They did not work on Tom, who only liked women who looked like him. Who can blame him? I don't blame him. Had I been Tom, I would seek only myself in the mirrors of other faces. He's dead now. He died, no matter how many women in whose faces he found himself. Is he seducible now? Are the dead seducible? The answer is no. Once they escape this mortal coil, no. The dead are inured to seduction. Believe me, I've tried. I've worn the pants sold by the armless man. He took the cash with his teeth. He too was inured to contrivances. Charms I have since given up willingly. Age did not steal them. I could still give it a go. No, I gave up every charm on that bracelet willingly. Snipped them away with wire cutters. Donated each to a different lake or river, which swallowed them like a fish swallows the hook. Yes, I hooked in my time a river, a lake. I hooked a whole town, my hometown, to which I returned like a conquering hero on July 4th, 1976, for the bicentennial celebration. I wore what I wore, shimmered and bangled. Somehow, against the whole town, I won the tug of war. I had no upper body strength, no lower body strength, but by sheer power of personality, defiance, shimmer, I won the bicentennial tug of war. Still, all of that I rescinded it like a bad law, wire cut the charms, each and every one, seeded every lake and river with the old tools of my trade, as lakes and rivers are stocked with fish so they will grow up to be hooked. Sad, isn't it? Both the fish story and my own. Both are stories of subterfuge, illusion, empty, but in a good way, not in a good way. Empty like an undistinguished bottle, like one of my grandfather's whiskey bottles, drained of its minimal magic. Maybe he escaped his misery for a hot second. What misery? Oh, the usual. A Jehovah's Witness wife who converted late in the game, loved her son more than her husband, couldn't cook all the poultry raw at the joints, made one good dish, sauerbraten. Then the son died and she tried to climb into the casket. All to say, no wonder he drained the bottle. No wonder the bottle was empty. No wonder my mother donated her orange skirt to Goodwill, her black skirt. My sister donated her pink bikini, the one she bled through. No wonder I talk to the dog that way I do, lie as I do to the dog. You will never die, I say. You are young. Your coat is not gray. You do not limp. You smell like fresh hay. And I'll just end real quickly with a very short poem. It's called Bobby. All the actors from the sitcoms I watched as a child are dead, and the musicians assassinated, overdosed, or natural causes. Take a hint, they shout from the top tier of the ancient Roman amphitheater. No, I will not take a hint. I still make a mean bowl of soup, which can now be poured directly from a can and inserted into a box that heats via electromagnetic radiation. I once owned a guitar and learned me some of the chords to me and Bobby McGee, and damn if I couldn't sing good. My voice was not like Janis, nothing like Janis. It was high, serene, forthcoming, piercing, mezzo, very lyric, very trill, hugely skinny like a water spout. The neighbors complained about its beauty. I sang, I sung, I'm singing. I barely began to begun, and I'm not done. Thank you. Thanks.
I'm really glad you cleared up that bit about the tug of war.
Girl, I couldn't have won without you.
I know.
You
We
really
beat
did.
we beat the whole fire department.
Don't ask me how. It was a supernatural time.
It was the bicentennial. We were like super powerful.
I can still see what we were wearing too.
No way.
I mean, clothes, the costumes were a big part of our power. Without them, I don't know if we would have had any magic. And now I kind of defy all that. I'm down to this tank top, you know. At some point, I threw it all away.
What I remember us wearing was like old men's pajama tops that we bought at the Goodwill.
And
And
then
then
shower curtains as capes.
right. And tons of beaded necklaces around our necks. I
Yeah.
mean, we were really a sight.
One of our worst moments was hitchhiking to Washington, D.C. and getting afros, getting like bad
Yeah,
afros, you know,
yeah.
and somehow thinking that was okay.
We looked awful. In fact, I wore my afro. I was taking a class from Mark Strand at the time, and I walked in with my afro, with all kinds of like stuff stuck in it, you know?
Yeah, we bought a lot of shit to stick in our head.
Yeah, and he kicked me out of class.
Well, we're not going to go any further with that story
No.
because I know there's more. So where
That's
do we
true.
go, girl? What do we
Well,
move?
let's talk about modern poetry, the class that we
Mm.
both took. I mean, we took this class as freshmen, and we took it from Con Hilberry, who we both adored. He was the kindest man and just so supportive and positive. And it was like it was a course that changed the course of both of our lives,
Yeah.
which is really amazing, you know. I mean, I didn't even realize it at the time, but that was the class in which I decided I wasn't going to be a lawyer, you know.
Thank God.
I
Although you
know.
could have been my divorce attorney, which would have
Yeah, right. Then I found out that lawyers didn't get to make stuff up.
damn it. Yeah, you know, Khan was so inviting. I mean, he really did believe that everybody gets to sit at the table. You don't have
Yeah,
to be good. You didn't have to
yeah.
come with your fresh, raw talent, you know. Um, and you know, we everything that I talked about in that poem was true. I mean, everybody we read was white. There was one woman, and she was young and already dead. And yet, we talked about this over the weekend, it still sort of created pillars in our head of these poets, Theodore Retke, William Carlos Williams, Sylvia Plath, Hopkins, and Wallace Stevens,
Mhm.
who have endured not as role models, but as challenges, I guess, or, you know.
Yeah, Stevens has gotten me through a lot of times, you
What
know.
if he knew that? He would probably be pissed.
Yeah, he probably would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was something, and then I really kind of modeled myself as a teacher on Con Hilberry, you know, because there was nothing like turning a poem into him and you know, it was crap, right? Because, you know, we were just starting out and writing our bad poems before the good stuff came, and well, yours were better than mine,
No.
but but you know, and he would write in this spidery kind of soft pencil. He would
Mhm.
write delightful at the bottom of the poem. And oh my God.
And a plus sign.
Yeah.
And that's really all it needed. And that's all we needed. We didn't
That's
need
all we
change
needed.
the to an and. We didn't need that shit. We
No.
just needed to know we were delightful.
Yeah. Right, right, exactly. I mean, I've said this, I said this to my friend Teresia, who I think is here. You know, a student never wrote a better poem because I gave them a B minus.
Exactly.
You know, they
Yeah.
just, it's not how it works.
Mm-mm.
So all
No,
you poetry teachers out there,
remember
be
that.
positive.
Damn it. Yeah, we both ended up being poetry teachers, living on
Mhm.
opposite sides of the continent and not seeing each other. I mean,
I
after
know.
Gail was sort of pulled out of college by her parents
Hmm.
and to go to another place. And I guess I would say that I've then lived with that vacancy.
Oh, yeah. You know, um, I, uh, my partner Chuck said something to me really interesting a few months ago. He said, you know, you've always had this profound sadness in you, but now that you're back in touch with Diane Seuss, it's gone.
Mm,
You know, I mean, I think that's really, that was what that separation did to us. It just, tried to destroy us, but it didn't.
no, but it took a long, long loop
Mm-hmm.
of us living weird separate lives to hitchhike back into this moment.
Right.
Yeah, we did a lot of hitching. Yeah. Hmm.
So should we talk more substantively about your poems?
Probably instead of being like, you had to be there, we did a lot of peyote.
Yeah, right. Um, if you don't mind, I would like to read a couple sentences from the email I sent you after I read the book. Would that be okay?
I'd love it.
I said, I've just read modern poetry through carefully, slowly, and I'm so stunned by it, I can't move. Actually can't, except for my hands, which are compelled to write to you. I've never read anything like it. I've never read anything as brave, as deep, as truthful, as brainy, as yes, beautiful, as heartbreaking, as soulful, as real. I feel it transforming me the way you've always transformed me. I can't imagine how difficult it was to write, but you wrote it. You're a damn hero. I
Oh God,
really believe that. I really believe that this, and you have talked about how difficult this book was to write.
I still haven't recovered, to be honest. I don't quite know what recovery will look like. I know, but I haven't. I haven't. Maybe
Yeah,
it'll
well,
help.
it'll take time. I mean, it'll take, probably longer than it took you to write the book
Hmm.
to get over it because you really have, I mean, there's a cost, to writing like this. There really is. You need to recover from it.
And there was no buffer, because a lot of it was during the pandemic as if it's over. And I was alone. I was alone, alone. There was no, and then Bear, my dog, died, and I was really alone. Um, and there was no distraction. It was just the feelings and Keats.
Wow. And Keats.
Hmm. Yeah, we found out we both have the Keats.
We both have our Keats masks.
And we didn't know it until Sunday. Yeah.
I know, I know.
So
Keats is such a huge figure for both of us, really. I mean, you've taken him much farther than I ever have artistically, but um he's just major. He it's like he invented the self, he invented the poetic self.
And I think one thing that moves me so much about him, well, I mean, he was our age when we met, when he was already dealing with dying, you know.
Yeah.
So birth and death were right on top of each other for him. And he really was trying hard to work out what poetry meant and what it could be and what it was, what he could do with it. And that became a model for this book for me. I ain't
Mhm.
Keats, but just the model of really working through the deepest existential questions by working through my relationship with poetry. Because that's the relationship that I have, that's it.
Yeah. Well, that's a good one.
Mhm. It doesn't leave.
It's always there.
Yeah.
Doesn't get drunk.
Although.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think this notion of negative capability is
Mhm.
just crucial to the making of art. That sense that you don't know where the hell you're going
Mhm.
and it's okay, right?
And
I
in
mean,
fact, he says it's the necessary state for writing.
right.
And that's why I
Right.
began this book with a poem called Little Fugue State, and hopefully it was also reflecting where a lot of people have been in the last, what, 6, 8 years of fascism and COVID and everything, of like, where in the fuck are we? Where am I? Where am I on the planet? Where's my body? Um, and so the willingness to live with the mystery rather than solving it,
Right.
that seemed to be Keats and Lorca's. You wrote about visiting Lorca, which I still wish we could do.
I
Uh,
know.
at least where they killed him. Um, maybe someday. But yeah, with Duende, he had the same notion as negative capability.
Hmm. Hmm. I think it's a little tackier in a good way.
Yeah. Thank God.
But
Yeah, Keats, had that angelic quality, at least,
hmm.
in our imaginations. Lorca
Yeah,
lived long enough to be debauched. But the more I read about Keats, he was kind of a nasty little freak too.
he boxed.
Yeah, he boxed, and he was scary. He was scary
Yeah.
as a boxer. He was really short, but everybody was short. And he was shorter than Prince. I put that in a poem.
Yeah, yeah. That's such a wonderful poem. Yeah, so should we open for questions, do you
Yeah,
think?
probably. It's uh-huh. Oh,
Anybody have
Peter.
questions?
Let's take a peek
Peter.
and see what people are saying. Lots of love in the room, that's for sure.
Uh,
But questions. Vicky says you are calling out to a generation of women of that time who lost a lot, and you show us it can be found.
mm,
Thank you. That's wonderful.
um, let's see. Lori says, "Thank you for saving me from law school, Gail. Didn't know you were passing a torch." Let's see. What else? Christy has a question. Yeah, Christy, please do ask your question. I'll pull it out of the chat. Let's see if there's anyone else that I missed further up. Yeah, just a lot of love. Let's see.
oh, Jonathan Everett has a question.
Let's see. Here we go. Can you talk about the cover art for modern poetry? Love this collection so much. Thank you.
Sure. So that photo, you can tell probably it was taken in a photo booth. And were we together then, Gail? Do you remember?
Yes, I
Yeah.
remember. Yeah.
And my mom I sent it to my mom, I think maybe from Spain. And not too long ago, a couple of years ago, I was visiting her and she said, "Hey, look what I found." And she had carried it in her billfold for all those years. I mean, like what, 40 some years. And
Jeez.
it had that, if you look at the cover, it sort of has stuff on it. Let me show you if you haven't seen it. Um, it looks like there's dust, but you can't rub it off. And and from the moment I saw it, I just had a feeling that's the cover. And it took a little convincing, but I don't think of it as me so much as these girls we were, um, on a with a title that sounds like a textbook. Um, and then, but instead of the usual jargon, it's this girl who's sort of mugging for the camera and, you know, it is alive, is fully alive. And, so much of the book is just about taking poetry in my own direction or feeling like I can transgress upon it. I have a right to it in some way, just like everybody else does, because I didn't feel that when I first went to college. I
Yeah.
felt very much like an outsider, and I still do. But over time, I guess, with people like Con Hilberry and Gail and others, I felt, well, maybe I can move the center to where I live, to me. At least for me, not for everybody, but for me. So I just liked the clash between the title and that photo. What do you have anything to say about that, Galina?
I love it. And I remember you in that exact outfit. I mean, I do. And when I first saw it, I have to say I cried because it just evoked that time so perfectly, that precious time. And I love it that you put it on the cover. And I'm going to go back to my word iconic, I really think it helps. It just shows that this is an iconic book,
Mm.
and it announces that along with the title. I mean, you nailed it.
Thank you.
You
Thank
really
you.
did.
Because so much of that stuff, as you know, in your amazing work, is just instinct, it's just intuition. I mean, I can't, it's hard even now to say, oh, here's why I did it. It's just you feel it's right.
Hmm.
Did Christy have a question?
I don't think Christie's posted it yet.
Oh,
We can, oh, wait, yeah, Christie has. What advice would you give to women in their 30s and 40s who are writing poetry? You are both so much more assured. What advice to get there in the poems? And you are both such tremendous poets. Thank you.
mm.
Oh, thank you. Well, stay alive is part number one, you
That's
know.
really it.
Stay alive.
Yeah,
Really.
and alive, you know. It,
Yeah.
it we had so many s- so much more freedom and fewer impediments. Um, and we weren't being constantly fed. Here's what everybody else is doing. Here's how everybody else looks. Here's what,
Yeah.
because we didn't have the internet. We didn't have all that shit. And so we were living raw. We, you know, we weren't living through a screen. We were walking down the sidewalk to the Woolworths to buy rhinestones to put in our afros,
Afros.
like a couple of chumps. But yeah, you know, so I would say just, you know, live, take the world in through your eyes and through your senses, through whatever senses are left to you. And don't um don't listen to people like us. I mean, you know, listen to yourself. I mean, the best poems come out of um the quirks of your own personality and upbringing and landscape. And you know, you can read, but I feel like whatever's happening right now, it almost makes people more insecure rather than less.
Mhm. Yeah, well, you talk about cobbling things together. I think, is it in My
It's
Education?
in My Education. Yeah, a
Yeah,
cobbled mind, a
cobbling.
cobbled
And
education.
I
Yeah.
love that verb. I think that's such an important verb, because it means, to put together, to construct, right? To build, but it also has a humility to it.
Mhm.
Right? Cobbling. It's,
Mhm.
it sounds sort of makeshift, and that's the way I've always felt writing. Like I'm just
Mhm.
throwing this stuff together. And then in later drafts, you kind of, if you're lucky, you realize why you put those things together.
Mhm. Yeah. Again, you know, you live in negative capability. And
Mhm.
that's not an easy way to live. I mean, look at us. Um, you know, it's
We'll
not,
be doing this again in another 50 years, Dee Dee.
yeah, girl. But yeah, you know, it's not easy to cobble a life, you know. You know, and I got that word just thinking about this house. I don't know if you ever went there, Wade's, and Bart and Mid and Jan Wade, and they had this house out in the country near where I was raised, and he built it out of field stones that he picked out of the fields, you know, and everything in it was patched together and ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculously constructed, and it was magical. You know,
Yeah.
you didn't want to be anywhere else, and
Yeah.
there could never be another house like it. You know, he'd find some weird little wrought iron staircase somewhere and stick that on, and and then have a bedroom up there at the top of the stairs, and the snow would come in the window and at the and pile at the bottom of the bed, you know. That that's that's the magic of cobbling.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the magic that you can't demand. You can't just sit down and say, okay, be magical and then be magical.
Yeah.
You cobble.
Yeah.
You cobble, and if you're lucky, magic will be there when you're done. I
You know,
mean,
you take what life has thrown at you or given to you. I mean, you do that in your poems, don't you?
yeah,
Can
yeah.
you can you say something about that?
About putting your life in there.
Well, about taking what life
Yeah.
gave, provided through, and how does that become your aesthetic?
Mm. That's interesting because my poems are sort of remarkably non-biographical, autobiographical. I don't really talk about my life that much. I talk about my inner life, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, what I'm cobbling together more often than not are not events, you
Mm-hmm.
know, or people necessarily. It's things that happen in here, and that
Mm-hmm.
happens because I'm reading, you know, and I don't watch screens. I mean, I just don't do
Mm-hmm.
it because I don't like. the screen format so much. I don't like TV, you know? So I avoid that stuff. So that doesn't get in there. I think it
Mhm.
would just be too much. It would be too crammed full if I watched TV.
It'd be
So,
crammed full of Quincy reruns.
right. Andy of Mayberry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, but there's a way in which, I mean, that brings up the whole idea of what confessional poetry is,
mhm,
right? And there's a way in which, I mean, you talk about your life and yet you're not a confessional poet,
mm-mm,
I don't think, you know? You're a romantic poet,
mhm.
neo-romantic, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to say about that.
Yeah,
I sort of like the photo on the front. You know, any any material is material, you know. Any way you turn your head, there's material.
yeah,
And, you know, for me, my life has been my material, but that's not the same as confessing.
right, right.
It's just the site of allegory for me, you know.
Right, right, exactly. I mean, allegory, metaphor,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's where the magic happens when this stuff that you've cobbled together somehow rises up as metaphor,
Mm-hmm. And
you
it
know?
seemed important to be a writer who does that because because of where I'm from and who I'm from. I do want to bring where I'm from and who I'm from to the table. I want to open up the gates and invite that in to poetry.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the project, you know. We all
Mm-hmm.
have a project. Christy, wherever you are, we all have a project or 12, you know. And it's
Yeah.
so much, I mean, it so much depends upon that wheelbarrow that you were raised with. You know, whatever life gave you from the very beginning, that, you know, live with it, you know, that
Mm-hmm.
pain, that mystery, that whatever the absences were. Um, and that becomes the allegory that you work for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm. It took me like almost 60 years to write a poem about my mother, you know? I mean, has been such a big figure in so many ways, um, mostly negative. But you know, so I just never felt I could write it. I didn't want her in my poems. And
Mm,
um finally I did. But you know, so sometimes you have to wait
mhm,
really long time to be able to approach some subject.
mhm.
And
There's a great essay by Stanley Plumley called Autobiography and Archetype. It's not real easy to find, but I've
hmm,
got it if anybody wants it. um, but he talks about that the the autobiographical frame is what reinvigorates archetype, and that archetypes make the individual life matter beyond the individual.
mhm,
And so I think we're all wrestling with those terms, with what, you know, I mean, when you're writing from what's in your head, from your intellect, from your image's soul, you, Gail, that's a form of autobiography,
mhm, yeah,
you know.
right.
Um, and it's a form I respect, probably, yes, more than I do um, my sort of storytelling. But that's what I've got, you know. You know.
Yeah, well, you do it good.
Thank you for saying good.
And you know, the other piece of advice I have to young writers is show up.
Yeah.
You know, I never realized that until late, you know, till I moved to Los Angeles, which has such a vibrant poetry community. And, you know, I started showing up at readings and things. That was when you still could, of course, but you know, just meeting people and
Mhm.
hearing people and feeling like you're part of a community. And that I know that isn't possible to do many places, but you know, things like this, I think, form community.
Mhm.
And that can sustain you. That sense of community can sustain you through really difficult periods, I think.
Yes. And, this book is the dedication is for my reader. And that's exactly why, because probably especially the readership for Frank's sonnets emboldened me to do this book. It gave me the courage to embark on a book that actually questioned the very architecture of my life, what I gave up everything for. And then to begin to question that was very scary. But so the reader, and then, Keats felt the same way. I mean, he literally reaches from death and says, reinvigorate me, bring me back, give me your attention, and red blood will stream in my veins again.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, our boy.
Our boy, our little boy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we have a couple of questions in the chat that actually have some commonality. Nancy says, could you talk about the different forms you played with in your book and how you bent them in new ways? And then Kelly says, can you talk about taking the forms and making them yours and really making them ours, queering them, yes, but yes, giving us from desolate towns a voice?
Mm, yeah. Well, I was interested, for instance, with the sonnet and Frank sonnets, and really looking at, okay, what can a sonnet be now? I asked in modern poetry, what can poetry be now? And, what in this time and place can 14 lines and all of that stuff be? And like the rest of my life, it turned out that I really needed to claim it um, as a form that I could make my mark on. That any form can be made yours, and then you send it back out into the world, and other people can make it theirs. And I did that in certain ways in this book with the ballad and with musical forms that I know nothing about. I had to learn, what's an aria, what's a coda, all that stuff. Um, but I did it mostly with the ballad in modern poetry. Now, nobody's going to put up with a Shakespearean sonnet, 140 Shakespearean sonnets that tell the story of a life, or with ballads that are written in ballad form. But you can still inhale them and make them contemporary, and bring them onto the page in your own image. And it's just a matter of feeling free to experiment, and still pay homage to these crazy people who came before us and invented this stuff for us. A form is an archetype. Um, I think of it like God, but God doesn't care if you mess with God, so mess with it, but not as a shortcut to not having to learn about it. Learn about it. You have to learn about it to mess with it. So that's all. Just, you have as much right as anybody else to create a sonnet in your own image.
That's great.
Thank
That was really beautiful. Yeah.
you.
I mean, that's
Reminded,
what I'm, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just reminded of a statement that René Damal said one time about how at a very early age he was really struggling with language, and then as a kid he discovered a dictionary, and he felt that he had been saved.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, to have language, to be my sister, who might be here listening, she taught me to read when I was 3, sitting between our twin beds. And basically, it was just like, here's how the vowels sound, here's how the consonants sound, read. And I did. And I don't know that I would have made it through my father's illness and death when I was 7 without that capacity. And then my mother went to college and brought books into the house, brought modern poetry, you know. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what modern was or poetry, but that it saved my life. It saved my sanity. Probably is true for everybody who's out there.
Mhm,
I know for Gail.
mhm. Yep,
Yep.
saved me.
Yeah, puts things in order or disorders the stuff that needs to be disordered, you know.
Right. No, I mean, it's Wallace Stevens putting the jar on a hill in Tennessee, everything kind of rises up around it and is some stuff that you can deal with. It's no longer wild. It's, art.
Hmm. Yeah, that's what I love about Keats too. And actually Gregory Orr, who I know you worked with for a time,
Mm-hmm.
his idea that to create a poem, which is a made thing, like a Grecian urn is a made thing, is to take the chaos and put it into something that lasts, that is outside of you. So even when I'm writing about supposedly about my life, it's a Grecian urn, it's
Mm-hmm.
a form, it's something outside of me. And that's, when people talk about and Orr has great writing on poetry and trauma, that's what's healing about writing is that it takes it from the roiling center and puts it outside of you. And then you shape it and you put it on the bookshelf behind you, Galena. Uh-huh.
I see Under the Volcano behind Peter. That's such a great book.
And behind me, some purple lights and
Purple Lights, your
and
homage to
TV
Prince.
reruns. Well, God, we're over time, Peter.
We find ourselves at the top of the hour, and I am so grateful to the both of you. This has been truly soul food in the
Mm.
honest sense of the word, and an affirmation of a friendship, and really touching to the core. Diane Seuss, congratulations on this remarkable collection. And Gail, thank you for making the best kind of accompaniment ever. This was such a treat.
Totally. Yeah, we should switch roles and have her be the book star next time.
Yeah, totally up for it. And a big
Mhm.
shout out to our friends at Grey Wolf Press for knowing a good thing when they see it year after year, and who produce truly fantastic work. And Kaylin, everybody, we love you. We have posted links in the chat function of Resume dashboard with which you may purchase books. But better yet, if you find yourselves in the hood, please come on down, browse our stacks. We are located in San Francisco's historic North Beach district, sandwiched between Vesuvio's, Tosca, and Specs. And I think if we were there now, we would all be going out for cocktails. But hey, Come on down and visit us. We're open from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., getting back to our pre-pandemic hours. Also, just want to say tonight's been made possible by support from the City Lights Foundation, keeping me dutifully employed and continuing the legacy of our founder, the late Lawrence Ferlinghetti, through our public events, our educational outreach, our publishing program, all dedicated to sustaining a vibrant community of readers, writers, and critical thinkers. Take care, everyone. We love you. Hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you, everybody, for
Thank
being
you.
here. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.
Love to you all. Love you, Galena.
Love you all too, and
Mhm.
you especially,
Mhm.
Di. Yeah.
We'll
Okay.
talk.
Yeah.
Night, everybody. Mm.